Welcome to the deep dive. So you gave us a really dense stack of research today, and it's focused on a moment I think we've all probably experienced. You know, that point where these really successful personal habits, or maybe these like strict internal rules you live by, they suddenly stop being helpful. They turn against you almost, moving from standards to, I don't know, restrictive mandates.
Exactly. This is a deep dive into what our sources are calling the inner rulebook. It's this custom-made set of psychological laws we all kind of construct for ourselves. Comes from childhood, culture, just life experience, right? And it sounds great, having rules. But the research points to its rigidity, how inflexible it becomes as a huge driver of modern anxiety, burnout, and just that awful feeling that you're constantly failing to meet your own standards.
Yeah, and these rules, they're often invisible, aren't they? Until they lead to some pretty absurd behavior. I was really struck by that example of Francesca. She's just buying cut flowers, right? Something nice. But she ends up spending, 45 minutes just obsessing over the bins at the grocery store. Her conscious thought was getting my money's worth, but the rule underneath, that was way harsher.
Oh, absolutely. Or think about it professionally. The sources detailed the author's own story back in grad school, struggling alone for hours with statistics leading to what they called minor humiliation. Why? Because her unspoken rule was, I have to do it all myself. Asking for help felt like admitting failure, a moral failing almost.
We see it in small ways like that, but the sources also hit on these really extreme cases, things that actively damage relationships. Like Jason's brother, the one who became estranged. His rule was so rigid, I can't hurt the environment ever. And this led him to force his family into strict veganism, banning all air travel. I mean, that just damages goodwill, doesn't it? It feels less like self-improvement and more like, self-righteousness.
It absolutely can be. And that rigidity, that inflexibility, is what the great psychoanalyst Dr. Horney called the tyranny of the shoulds. She argued that this internal mindset, it demands we live up to this ultimate, totally impossible standard. She summed it up perfectly. You should be able to endure everything, to understand everything, to like everybody, to always be productive.
Wait, hold on. That standard it's literally impossible. No one can do all that. So if we know these rules are destructive and they lead to exhaustion, self-sabotage, why are we so terrified of breaking them? That feeling, that need to follow the rule, it must be tied to something much deeper than just having good habits.
It absolutely is, and we're definitely going to unpack that. But first, let's be fair, right? We're not suggesting you just, ditch all structure and go feral at surf camp in Baja, as one source put it. Rules do have value. They give us clarity, simplify decisions, create a sense of control. They can reduce criticism, too, because we feel, I'm doing it right.
Okay, so the danger zone isn't having rules. It's when a rule becomes unnecessary, rigid, arbitrary, or, and this feels key, when we identify with it too much, like it defines our whole character.
Exactly, and we often add these extra unseen limitations without even realizing it. It's fascinating. The sources mentioned a great illustration of this self-sabotage, the 9-dot problem. Dr. Norman Maier, way back in 1930. The rules are simple. Connect all 9 dots arranged in a square using only 4 straight lines without lifting your pen.
Right, I think I remember this one. And most people fail again and again. Why? Because they add a 4th rule, one that isn't actually there. You have to stay inside the imaginary square the dots make. You impose this boundary that makes the puzzle impossible to solve. It's a perfect metaphor for the inner rulebook. We stick to these self-imposed limits that actually work against what we're trying to achieve.
And that phenomenon, creating unseen limits, it links straight back to Horney's work on the tyranny of the shoulds. She actually broke down this tyranny into 3 core characteristics that really expose their rigidity.
Okay, let's get into those. What's the first characteristic?
Number 1. These rigid rules disregard feasibility completely. We aim to follow them, whether or not they're realistic, rational, or even physical possible. It's like we feel we should know everything, understand everything, foresee every single outcome, which is impossible.
That immediately makes me think of that example, Xavier, the musical theater major in the sources. What was his core rule, the one that was really grinding him down?
His was pretty simple on the surface. Always be productive, don't waste time. But this drove him to feel like he should somehow transcend, the basic limits of a 24-hour day. And the human need for sleep. And because he couldn't, obviously, he felt like he was constantly failing. There was no room for being human.
Okay, that's rough. The second characteristic sounds even more brutal based on the description.
It kind of is. Rigid rules disregard context.
Intriguing, right?
We feel we should have magically known better, done better, regardless of the actual circumstances. Maybe there was trauma or unexpected changes, really challenging situations. Doesn't matter to the rule book. Horney had this vivid phrase for it. We expect ourselves to emerge from difficulty like a lily out of a swamp.
Ah.
Meaning, just doing your best under pressure, not good enough. The outcome has to be pristine, perfect, untouched by the struggle.
Wow. Okay. And the third one. This one I find genuinely baffling. They're often contradictory. How can your internal rulebook demand two opposite things at the same time?
Oh, easily. It happens all the time. The rule book is full of these double binds, like be fiercely independent and be a great team player. Or please everyone and don't care what anyone thinks. You're constantly caught between these impossible conflicting standards. It pretty much guarantees you always feel like you're falling short somewhere.
And what's fascinating, too, is how arbitrary our personal idea of the right way can become. You mentioned the contrast between the author meticulously researching and timing a flawless clam bake, and then Juan, who had this spontaneous, messy, late-night clam bake that was apparently a huge success. Both got clams, but the process, completely different.
That arbitrary nature is so important. The author's perfectionism. It delivered a perfect dish at the perfect moment. Predictable, controlled, one spontaneous way. It required quick thinking, adapting, problem-solving on the fly. The result wasn't just clams. It was confidence, bonding, a midnight feast, a shared experience. So if the underlying value is actually shared connection, maybe Juan's messy way was more effective, right?
Yeah.
But the perfectionist in a rulebook insists only the flawless, timed way is the golden path. There's only one right.
Okay, but that raises a tricky point. If Juan's messy way is maybe less reliable, how do we justify accepting lower reliability? Especially just for the sake of something fuzzy like confidence or bonding. For a lot of really successful people, that high reliability is their identity. It's how they define themselves.
That is the absolute crux of it. These rules get tangled up with our identity. Following them makes us feel good, capable, worthy people. It affirms us. And that's why challenging them can feel so incredibly difficult, almost physically painful, like pulling out toenails, as one source described it. Dr. Ross Shafran defined this as clinical perfectionism. It's maintained by the biased evaluation of achieving these personally demanding standards. You value the struggle itself.
So the stress, the exhaustion, that actually becomes the proof that we're doing it right, that we're worthy.
Precisely. We find a certain pleasure, or maybe satisfaction, in the intensity of the effort. The sources mentioned Jonathan, right? Working 44 hours straight on a report. He wasn't just trying to finish it. He was working to prove he had done the report justice. The stress itself becomes a proxy for worthiness, for having earned the result.
But the cost, I mean, it's huge. Chronic frazzle, as the sources call it, sleep deprivation, loneliness, burnout.
The cumulative effect of that long-term balls-to-the-wall striving is just unsustainable.
And that state of exhaustion, that frazzle, it seems like it links directly into the next trap you mentioned, when our wants become shoulds.
Yes, exactly. That's where the inner rule book can really spiral. When we're chronically frazzled, run down, we often develop what the sources call demand sensitivity. It's like this heightened awareness of duties, obligations, perceived expectations, signaled by that constant internal chirping smoke detector of the word should.
Oh, yeah. I think I probably masturbate, as Dr. Albert Ellis wonderfully put it, before I even finish my first coffee some mornings. The demands just feel constant.
They absolutely do. And this sensitivity, it turns the volitional into the obligatory, as Dr. Alan Mallinger has described it. Things you want to do become things you have to do. Remember, Ben, finding his old art supplies, that initial feeling was joy, a clear want. But almost immediately, his demand-sensitive rule book kicked in and created a to-do list. Get an easel, find drawing exercises, sign up for a class. The fun thing instantly became another chore on the list, something to resent.
And the consequence of that is demand resistance, right?
Right.
As that pile of have-tos grows, we start feeling resentful, even towards things we originally wanted. So we resist, maybe passively. We procrastinate, take 6 weeks to answer a simple email, just drag our feet on everything.
Exactly. And the underlying reason is often a deep, perhaps unconscious need for autonomy, for agency. When we feel overwhelmed by obligations, even self-imposed ones, resistance feels like the only way to assert ourselves. It's like, I oppose, therefore I am. It becomes a rebellion against this tyranny we've created for ourselves.
Okay, so breaking that cycle of demand and resistance seems like the first priority in trying to revise this rule book. The sources offer a pretty practical path forward, starting with what sounds like the simplest step. Just notice and name the rules. Try to create some space, some options by spotting those driving thoughts. The ones with words like should, always, never, have to.
Right, but sometimes those rules are really fuzzy, aren't they? Deeply ingrained, maybe not even fully conscious. Like Francesca at the flower bin, she probably wasn't thinking, I must make everyone happy consciously. So how do you actually find those hidden, unarticulated rules?
The advice is to follow the trail of strong emotion, which makes sense. Like when do you feel really self-righteous or maybe overly confident? Those feelings might be driven by rules like I have to be impressive or I have to do things myself. And conversely, tune into resentment or obligation. Remember Jenna slogging through that boring book she hated? That resentment pointed her straight to her rule. I have to finish what I start, even if it's pointless.
And for Francesca, really tuning into that feeling, that resentment and anxiety during the 45 minutes with the flowers, it eventually led her to articulate her core rules. What were they again? I can't make mistakes, I have to be my best, and I have to make everyone happy. Just saying them out loud, articulating them is powerful. It gives you choice, suddenly.
Right. And once you've named a rule, the next step is to actually weigh the costs and benefits. Because even the most toxic rules, they're usually buying you something, right? Even if it's just a false sense of security. Francesca's rules, for instance, they bought her social safety, or at least her brain thought they did. They were trying to maintain harmony, avoid criticism. But the cost, the exhaustion, the lost time, the anxiety, it dramatically outweighed that perceived benefit.
Exactly. So the fundamental shift here is moving away from the shoulds and towards your genuine values, what actually matters to you. Horney reminds us that the shoulds lack the moral seriousness of genuine ideals. They're often arbitrary, not deeply held principles. So we need to focus on workability given the specific context instead of some generic idea of what should be.
Context and workability. Those seem crucial. I mean, that example of eating, 30 hot dogs in 10 minutes? In most contexts, that sounds bizarre, maybe even self-destructive. But in the context of a scholarship prize eating contest, suddenly it makes more sense. It's context-dependent success, isn't it?
Precisely. Or think about the rule, be a good mom. What that means, what's workable, changes drastically depending on the context. If you have resources, time, support, maybe it means making organic baby food from scratch. But if you're struggling deeply, maybe with addiction and homelessness, being a good mom might tragically mean making the incredibly difficult choice to give your baby up to ensure their safety and well-being. Workability isn't fixed. It changes constantly based on the situation, and our rules need to be flexible enough to adapt.
Okay, so you notice the rule, you weigh it, you connect to your values, you consider context. Then what? How do you actually change the behavior? The ultimate test seems to be this behavioral experiment idea from Dr. Schafran's clinical work.
Yes. This is where you actively test a new behavior. And crucially, you remember that your thoughts and your behavior can be independent. You might still have the thought, the old rule chirping away, I have to make everyone happy, but you consciously choose a different action. Like buying just one variety pack of stickers for the party goodie bags, instead of painstakingly customizing every single one, you act against the mandate, just to see what actually happens in reality.
I realized I've sort of been doing this unintentionally, maybe, with my own rule. I have to do it all myself. For years, if someone offered help, my automatic response was, no thanks, I got it. Just a knee-jerk reaction. Now, sometimes I notice that urge, and I consciously choose to say, you know what? Yes, I'd love a hand. Thanks so much for offering. Still feels a bit wrong.
Right.
Uncomfortable, but honestly, nothing bad ever happens. Usually it's just easier.
And that evaluation afterwards is key. Asking yourself, did my test drive bring me closer to the life I want to live, to being the person I want to be? And acknowledging that it probably will feel uncomfortable at first. Old rules don't like being broken. Remember Xavier. He felt wrong taking just a short walk after lunch because it violated his productivity rule. But that small break, that unproductive time, quickly became the best, most clarifying part of his day. It helped him be more effective overall.
Right, and Francesca's big road test came during her son's birthday party, didn't it? The wind basically blew up all her carefully laid, perfect plans. It forced her to be flexible. She had to use, dirty rocks off the ground to hold the tablecloth down, accept help from the kids making a mess. She had to abandon the idea of the perfect cake table setup. But what did that allow? It allowed her to actually follow her deeper value of being present with her kids by going on the hayride with her boys instead of fussing over details. The imperfect party was actually a success because it aligned with what truly mattered to her.
That's such a great illustration. And it shows the path out of that resistance trap we talked about earlier. It's about reconnecting with our genuine wants. We have to consciously make space for them. The sources suggest we need to dare to be unproductive sometimes. Maybe try swapping the filter of what would be correct or what should I do for what looks fun, what looks cool or interesting. just for a bit.
And if you're resisting a task you genuinely do need or want to do, like checking email, the idea is to reframe it based on your values. So instead of thinking, ugh, I need to get through my inbox, which feels like an obligation, try reframing it as maybe connecting with these individual people or communicating effectively. That small shift can turn a chore you resist into a freely chosen action that aligns with your value of, say, being reliable or connected.
Absolutely. It's about reclaiming agency. And ultimately, you have to trust that you are strong enough to tolerate the initial discomfort that comes when you bend or break an old rigid rule. Your needs and wants are important, period. Not because they serve some productive purpose, but just because you need them and like them. You could tolerate that initial wobble, that feeling of doubt or anxiety, in service of living a more flexible, meaningful life. One that's guided by what's workable and genuinely valuable to you right now, not by some dusty, inherited, impossible man.